only have 90 minutes here, and we've got 8 people on our forum. So we're going to be trying to do this as efficiently time-wise as possible. Just give a quick introduction for myself. I'm Ryan Hagglund. I first came to Japan in '98 on the JET program. After that, worked for 5 years at a private high school. At that time, got my MA from University of Birmingham, and then I did go back to the United States in Oregon for a year and a half to get my Master's of Arts in Teaching and teaching certification through the state of Oregon. I run my English school, which is called My English School. I'm not just being vain every time I say it's my English school. And we have 8 schools in Yamagata, 2 schools in the Kansai area, employing right now, I think 18 teachers. And if you include all the staff at our emerging kindergarten, we're at just short of 40 staff now at the school. And so that's where I come in. I'm also coordinator for the School Owners SIG, which is sponsoring this presentation. And the SIG has been trying to work hard getting school owners together to talk about different aspects of running schools, language schools. And what we're going to do on this one is, instead of my introducing all of the presenters are split into 2 sections. Trying to do all 8 at one time is a little overwhelming. So we have 4 in the first half, 4 in the second half. And they will each have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and their the topic. The start of this presentation came from the book, this book here, Teacher Narratives from the Eikaiwa Classroom, Moving Beyond McEnglish. And all 8 of today's presenters have chapters in this book. So they will talk about their chapter rather than me spending time introducing each one of them individually. But first, one of the editors for the book here, one of the editors is Daniel Hooper. And so Dan, if you could give a quick introduction to the book, please.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So yeah, as Ryan kindly mentioned, all of the presenters today are contributors to this book that myself and Natasha Hashimoto, hopefully she's here, chose to, I guess, put together. So I'm just going to give you very briefly kind of our rationale behind it and kind of a rationale behind this event, really. The first thing is really that Eikaiwa is broad and broader than maybe many people would have us believe. So there are several like kind of overarching like grand narratives about Eikaiwa that essentially kind of stigmatize the industry or the field, boiling Eikaiwa down to, for example, chain schools, like the bubble era, the charisma man, those kind of derogatory stereotypes. So we wanted to recognize and kind of promote the idea that there are many different types of Eikaiwa that fall under this term. And within each school, each individual teacher, there is huge variation between each individual teacher and their, how they exercise their agency, their professional beliefs and identity. These are not all charisma men, basically, is what we wanted to put forward. Also, a key point is that Eikaiwa is not really very well represented in academic literature. If you read academic papers on Eikaiwa, you would be forgiven for believing that it's housewives coming to spend time with like Caucasian male teachers for leisure purposes. And although, that is something that does occur, most Eikaiwa teaching is like really based on teaching children. And this is not really represented at all. So this is why we were delighted to have Ruthie and Lesley contributing to our book, because this is huge and it's not being heard enough. Also linked to this is the idea that Eikaiwa is constantly evolving and also innovating. There is kind of widespread recognition that innovation is going on in tertiary education and to a certain degree, the course of study, primary and secondary education. But we didn't really feel this was being recognized in Eikaiwa enough. Eikaiwa is not bubble era Eikaiwa anymore. And this is linked to one of the benefits of Eikaiwa. School owners, like members of this SIG, are able to enact change. And, in many cases, more freely than university teachers. Although, university teachers, well, actually, no, universities are for profit a lot of the time. That's another fallacy. Also, we have masses of admin we have to kind of trudge through. Whereas, so really, Acai was exciting. So I wanted to, while recognizing issues within the industry, also looking at framing it in a more positive way, in a more constructive way, where members of, for example, the school owner SIG can, be secure in the fact they have a legitimate professional identity within JALT and within the field. So finally, I'll shut up in a minute, sorry. As Ryan mentioned, today we're going to be talking about chapters from this book. And at the moment, Candlin and Minard, our wonderful publisher, are holding a 50% deal. So I'll put this QR code up at the end as well, if I'm sure time will allow. So this will give you 50% off all ebooks in the Life and Education in Japan series, the series our book is a proud member of, until December 31st, 2020. And this also includes Foreign Female English Teachers in Japanese Education. So this is a wonderful book that our series editors, Diane, Melody, are involved in. And also Intercultural Families and Education in Japan. So these are all groundbreaking books that there's been a lot of buzz about online. So you can get 50% off, so you can buy yourself a nice Christmas present. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So what we're going into next is a section of 4 presenters from 4 of the chapter authors, and they're more in the sections written about social issues in Japan. The people who will be speaking in this section are Patrick Kiernan. My apologies if I mispronounced your last name there. Natasha Hashimoto, Daniel Hooper, and Luke Lawrence. And each of you, a 3-minute introduction of you and your chapter, please. First will be Patrick.
Okay, good morning. I came to Japan in 1990, just at the end of the bubble era. And I've spent about 12 years altogether teaching Eikaiwa myself, including 9 years at one school. Really teaching students of all ages and abilities. But my chapter was about 2 teachers in particular that was part of a larger project exploring teacher identity in Japan. And the title of the chapter is 2 Narratives of Professional Identity. And so one of the teachers was a very ambitious teacher, and she framed her professional identity in terms of the progress she made in terms of promotion. She was working in a highly professional-oriented school. It was very aimed at high-level business students, and she became the manager of the school. Eventually, the school had to close for financial reasons, and she actually started her own school with some of her colleagues. And it was noticeable that she also used a lot of the kind of technical kind of language associated with language teaching. So it was very much a kind of professional, well, with a capital P, I suppose, sense of professional identity. The other teacher was very, very different in terms of the way he framed his professional identity. He was a teacher at one of the chain schools, as it were, and he actually avoided any kind of promotion. He did not want to get promoted, and he expressed himself in much more everyday terms, and he described his position in the school as being at the bottom of the food chain. The methodology that was used by the school, he described as a load of old rubbish, and it was something that he would do when he was being observed, but taught in his own way the rest of the time. What was interesting was that although they framed their professional identities in very different ways, they also had a number of things in common, particularly in terms of the way that they taught. Okay, running out of time here, and I'm just getting to my main point, which is that they both used what we might call authentic materials, and described their students as people who were mature opinions and experiences, and so they both had a kind of high respect for themselves and their students. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I have to be fairly strict on the time constraints here. Okay, next would be, is Natasha with us now? Okay.
It's okay. We can move on. If she jumps in, we can slot her in. If not, we've got a little more time.
Yep. So Dan, you're next, talking about your chapter, please.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you. So my name is Daniel Hooper. I've been in Japan for 15 years. I love it. I worked in Eikaiwa for about 8 years. It made me the teacher I am today. I work in uni. I still refer to myself as an Eikaiwa teacher proudly. I love it. So basically, my chapter was called Just for the Casuals. And I was looking at the motivation of adults participating in Eikaiwa classes, and whether this was primarily for language acquisition or for leisure. And across this journey, I kind of, through my experiences as an Eikaiwa teacher, and then later as an Eikaiwa teacher researcher, I was able to kind of challenge kind of assumptions that I'd previously held. The first one being related to the very touchy word of fun. Now, fun is often framed, I would argue, particularly in Japanese ELT, as a dirty word, because of the idea of a performative identity of a wacky foreigner. Whereas through a 1-year diary study I did of one of my learners, I came to understand that fun is not a dirty word. Fun, if it's based on principled teaching, principled pedagogy, can be really valuable in sustaining learner motivation and creating a comfortable environment for learning. Basically, this is, affective filter, all of that stuff. Also, another assumption that I already kind of talked about a little in the intro is that Eikaiwa is not a singular entity. So I did a trio ethnography, which is a very interesting research methodology, with 2 Japanese Eikaiwa teachers. And through our kind of critical discussions, I came to learn that even within one school, teachers' experiences and teachers' realities are vastly different. So it actually served to disrupt some of my beliefs about what I thought Eikaiwa was. So finally, what does this mean? I argue that this allows us to position take as teachers. Position take means argue, use our agency to create our own identity and practice, even within somewhere like Nova or a big chain school. We are not lemmings, we are teachers whether you work in university or high school or wherever, or even Eikaiwa, we are teachers and we can resist institutional or structural practices. So I wanted to end on that kind of positive and empowering note for everyone. Thank you.
All right, perfect timing, Daniel. Thank you. All right, our next of the last of the group of, well, group of three now would be Luke. And could you please introduce yourself in your book?
Yeah, hi, I'm Luke Lawrence. I've been in Japan for about 18 years, and I spent around 5 or 6 years as an Eikaiwa teacher and manager. So my chapter in the book was called Context is Everything, Qualifications, Training, and the Myth of the Untrained Eikaiwa Teacher. Basically, I just wanted to explode the myth that Eikaiwa teachers were not trained, and I wanted to contrast the idea of training with formal qualifications. So, you know, it may be true that some, although not all, Eikaiwa teachers maybe lack formal certificates like TESOL or CELTA or MAs and things like that. But especially in the chain schools, most Eikaiwas do provide their own in-house context, learner and teacher appropriate training. So I just wanted to talk about this in my chapter. So basically I just go through my own journey and experience and talk about my own qualifications, which is a Cambridge CELTA and an MA TESOL. So for example, with the CELTA, when I started Eikaiwa, when I arrived in Japan, I had a newly minted CELTA, and I kind of felt I was a good teacher, and the other people around me didn't have these kind of qualifications. And so I kind of resisted the in-house training I was given, and well, it didn't end well, basically. The CELTA was designed for multilingual classes and mainly for students that are studying in an English-speaking country, and that wasn't my context at all. So it didn't help me, and it was only when I kind of finally embraced the training that I'd been given that I became a much better teacher, basically. And then I went on and I did a MA in TESOL, and I started working at a university. And again, I kind of found that my MA didn't really help me in any way whatsoever. It was purely theoretical. There were approaches and things that I studied, but they didn't help me become a better teacher. And I just ended up reflecting on the fact that basically that point in my career, when I finally embraced the training that I'd been given as an Eikaiwa teacher, was probably represented the kind of the best teacher version of myself that I've ever been. And I'm kind of constantly trying to get back to. So that was basically the chapter. I just wanted to give the message that Eikaiwa teachers may be less qualified than other teachers, but they're certainly not untrained. That was the main message behind the chapter, basically.
All right, thank you very much. The next section we're going into will be the question section for the current three. I see, yeah, Patrick, you already have your hand up for the one. We have essentially 15 minutes for some set questions that we come up with ahead of time, and then remaining 7 minutes after that for audience questions. If you have a question for one or more of the three panelists, the current three panelists, please write it in the chat section. The first question we have would be, what are factors or barriers that result in a lack of research on Eikaiwa? Is that what you were wanting to speak on, Patrick? I saw your hand up first.
Sorry, I was just applauding Luke, actually.
Not a hand. Okay, my apologies.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, okay, Daniel, you said, okay, so who would like to respond on that one?
Well, having done research in Eikaiwa when I was a teacher, I guess one of the main things is, of course, getting permission from the school. Some schools are very, very accommodating. Some are quite suspicious. Sorry, my kid's screaming. Just a second. Hold on, sorry.
All right. Well, while Dan is working on that, Patrick or Luke, do you guys have comments you would like on this question? What are the factors and barriers that result in lack of research on Eikaiwa?
Well, yeah, I think as Daniel said, the schools are private institutions and they often don't have kind of connections. And also, I think on the other side of things, if you're an Eikaiwa teacher, it's you know, it's difficult to be in a situation where you can kind of prepare to get things published, I think, very often. I mean, early on, well, I can remember coming to the JALT conference as an Eikaiwa teacher, and people would kind of say, "Which university do you teach at?" And yeah, so I guess there's a little bit of two different worlds, maybe, is part of it. You know, the research world and the teaching world, in a sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the JALT peer support group helped a lot, because obviously I didn't have like an academic community of practice, like kind of check through my work and stuff. Like, you know, in university, I can just ask someone down the hall. But so yeah, having that available from JALT was super helpful early on. Also, you know, my community of practice that I built within the MA program as well that I did was really useful. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a big thing, and yeah, I can definitely empathize with Patrick's experience coming to JALT as an Eikaiwa teacher. Yeah, it does feel like two different worlds, but I hope it's changing, and I hope, you know, we're kind of opening the floodgates with this project in a way. There are places to publish your work, I guess. Okay.
And I think just to jump in, maybe also linked to what Dan was talking about at the beginning about the kind of stigma that is there around Eikaiwa. I think a lot of people, when they become researchers, they kind of selectively forget their Eikaiwa years. And I've seen it left off CVs and things like that. And I think this is related to the stigma behind it, and they just kind of want to forget it had ever happened, which I think is really, really sad, but that might be part of it.
All right, thank you very much. So we had the next question we had on here was, what are your hopes for the future of the Eikaiwa industry? Because I know all three of you now, you're not in the industry any longer, but obviously you feel you have connections to it, or you wouldn't have written a chapter in this book. So yeah, why don't, on this one, just raise your hand if you'd like to go ahead and speak on this one. Okay, no hands. So Patrick.
Oh, I think Ruthie wants to say something.
Oh, Ruth. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess we could speak it.
No, Patrick should go ahead because it's his
Okay,
turn.
okay, all right, okay. Patrick, sorry.
Oh, okay. So I thought Ruth had her hand up from.
I did, but it's fine.
Oh, okay. So my hopes for the well, certainly I would like to see greater recognition of the value of it, particularly in terms of kind of learning to, you know, kind of the sort of practical side of the language. So one thing I certainly saw as a teacher, because I was in the same school for a long time, was the, you know, the progress that was made in terms of development, you know, over a number of years in language. So yeah, I'd certainly like to see recognition of that as the main thing.
Okay, can I add my thoughts? I would like to see more diversity. There's still the idea that I think native speakerism is still very prevalent in Eikaiwa, maybe more so than other areas of English language teaching. So I'd like to see more diversity in terms of the kinds of the backgrounds and the different kinds of teachers that work in Eikaiwa. And one thing that came out when I read the book, where the other chapters in the book was, and also some of Dan's research, there's like a tension between kind of teachers and admin staff, or teachers and managers. I would like to see a bit more kind of collaboration, and some, you know, like the staff and the teachers are on the same side. It seemed to be like different ideology. It seemed to be like they were against each other. So that came out of that book, which I had no knowledge of, because I didn't see that side of it before I read this book. But I would like to see a bit more collaboration and cooperation and integration between the kind of the teachers and the management and the staff and the admin and everyone. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. And just to give me, I was just remembering, yeah, Ruthie, we are going to be covering the exact same questions during the second half when you're up. So I don't want to give the impression I'm skipping you over. It's just if we can leave your comment until the second half there. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry. Just to move on from follow on from Luke's comment, like I think this is one area of innovation that I kind of hinted at earlier. Well, fairness, really. I see far more from even my time in like a tiny Eikaiwa in the countryside in Japan. You know, half of, maybe a third of our staff were Filipino or Brazilian teachers from the area. And I mean, my university is pretty decent with diversity, but I would argue that that's probably not representative of most university English departments in terms of foreign staff. So I think that, you know, this is an area where maybe we can see change, where more I know it's happening in the ALT kind of sector now, but also, yeah, more Filipino teachers. Marco Brazil, I don't know if you guys know him, is doing wonderful work helping Filipino teachers, FETJ Japan. So there are lots of organizations doing this. So yeah, I hope this is something which will get a lot more coverage in the future as well. I know, who is it? Alison Stewart did a book recently from Multilingual Matters about this.
Thank you. We'll head on to the next question here, and this one is about metaphor. If you could think of a metaphor for your experience as an Eikaiwa teacher, what would it be?
Okay, I'll give mine quick. I already used one 2 years ago at JALT. I said it was like special forces training. It's like Navy SEAL training for teachers. Basically, in university now, sometimes people are like, oh, are you going to be okay? I'm like, of course I am. I've been trained, you know, in a situation which was really flexible sometimes, and, you know, sometimes chaotic. So yeah, for me, I can, if someone throws something at me, I'm fine. And that's all because of Eikaiwa, because I have that training. I have the, what is it they call it? Hell Week in the Navy SEALs. So yeah, that's my metaphor.
All right. Yeah, Luke. Well, both Luke and Patrick, both of you were smiling.
I'll go first. This was the most difficult question for me. The one I came up with was not necessarily myself, I guess, but it's like your first band, or like being in like your high school band. It's something which you're kind of slightly ashamed and embarrassed about, but when you listen back to it, there's it's rough around the edges, but it's actually pretty good, and it was done with passion and sincerity, and it's much better than it's given credit for. So that's for, I think some people might have that experience of it.
Thank you. And Patrick.
I must have missed the memo about metaphors. I don't know if I really got a good metaphor for it, but yeah, I mean, I think it was, you know, it was like the experience bit. So you know, if I mean, another thing I was doing at the same time was martial arts, and so it's like one thing to like you know, kind of read about things, which is kind of a lot of what the university experience seems to be like, and that was more like the actual doing of it, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of on the spot here, so.
Well, yeah. Apologies for that. Yeah. We could go on to the next question. We have two more of the set questions, and then we'll go into the audience questions. The fourth of our set questions is, what value do you feel that Eikaiwa schools have that other contexts do not have? And we've already heard some comments in the previous answers about that, and then the discussions here on the chat. But if you would like to add on to that, it looks like Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did a study on this where I interviewed teachers who transitioned from Eikaiwa into university, like many of our members here, and I kind of called it like trading off, not trading up. So, you know, there's a kind of common narrative of like, oh, you've moved up to university teaching, but actually what a lot of people told me was, there are things which I can't do in university now. Like, and one of these things was like having that human connection. And this is huge. This is like relatedness, self-determination theory. It's in like so many models, having a human connection with someone. Like, I was talking to Lesley the other day, she was saying like, I've grown up with my students, right? Like, that's amazing. And like, you get that from the smaller classes in Eikaiwa. And, you know, for research too, like I'm really touched, we're going to get into this later, the idea of using research in an exploitative way. We have to be really careful. But I think like getting that really deep understanding of someone as a person, not as a learner, as a human being, is really important in research. And I think like this is a huge area that we could maybe like focus on in the future and make research more accessible too. So I think that's, Eikaiwa has a lot of potential both for teaching and also for like research too, positive research.
Wait, Patrick or Luke, would either one of you like to add to that, or?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so perhaps if I could bring the metaphor thing back there then. So one thing is, I think it's you know, a bit like, you know, what a plant growing or something. So, I mean, one of the things I was able to experience in Acai was actually seeing, like, well, particularly with children, you know, coming into it with no English at all, and, you know, the way that they kind of developed. So seeing that developmental process over time, and whereas you know, in the university there's just, you know, the students come in with whatever, and you maybe get a little segment, but you can't really see the language development process. So from a teacher's point of view, and, you know, obviously from the student's point of view, I think also that is well, where some real kind of development can take place, as it were, you know, sort of language skill rather than knowledge about language.
Thank you. Yeah, Luke, it looked like you had your hand.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I think a big part of it is the student motivation and the diversity of the students. I think other contexts don't offer that at all. You know, in one day I could teach a 5-year-old, I could teach a postman, I could teach a CEO. You know, you don't get that kind of unique opportunity to meet these different people from different walks of life. And also I found, especially, I was working for a big chain, it was one of the cheaper ones. These people were not people that were kind of doing it as a fun hobby. They were taking out loans in order to, you know, reach their goal, or, you know, do this desire to learn English. And when now I'm teaching at university, and I've got 30 completely unmotivated students who've got no clue that their parents have just paid however many million yen for them to sit in a bored classroom. These students were, you know, they were people that really, really wanted to learn English, and they were prepared to kind of put themselves in debt to be able to do so. And that was really motivating for me as a teacher, to want to help them to, you know, achieve their goal of learning English. So I think only for the context that I've taught in, which is business English, university teaching, it didn't offer that kind of, I don't know how to put it, but I felt like students really, really wanted to learn. And that was really great as a teacher.
Okay, I would like to get to the last question, but so if each of you could answer just in one quick sentence, what do you feel are the most common, and this is most common misconceptions. Let's change it to the most common misconception. Let's change it to one in one sentence that you think about Eikaiwa schools. If I put you on the spot again, Patrick, here real quick.
The most common misconceptions is that there's no professionalism, I think, in Eikaiwa.
Oh, thank you. Luke.
Very similar, yeah. What I talked about, the teachers are untrained and they don't care about pedagogy is a misconception.
And Dan.
Yeah, the Eikaiwas are uniform. Every Eikaiwa is the same. Every Eikaiwa is Nova in the 80s.
All right, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get into the audience question section here. There's a couple questions that were up here. I apologize if I missed some because there's trying to find the questions via all the comments in the chat section can be a little difficult. But first question I see here, we've got it, I think Joe Minard, my apologies for the pronunciation, but he put in what kind of training is provided in Eikaiwa schools. And pardon me?
She.
Oh, she?
She,
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you, Lesley. Thank you very much for correcting me on that. She asked, yeah, what kind of training is provided in Eikaiwa schools? Do you mind Luke, do you mind starting with that, or does one of the three of you specifically want to talk on that?
Yeah, I can talk about it, as that was my chapter was focused on. Basically, there's initial training. My experience anyway, there was there was a week of initial training which was very thorough. It was based, I guess it was kind of PPP based, but there was also lots of practical ideas of lesson planning, backwards lesson planning and role play construction and things like that. And then after that initial week, there was as well, there was ongoing workshops at the place that I worked at, which were often delivered by the teachers themselves. And of course, there was ongoing evaluations, which included a one-to-one training element as well in the place that I worked at least. So there was, as well as initial pretty thorough training, there was constant ongoing training basically.
Thank you. And yeah, Dan, and again, the question someone mentioned in the chat that it would be helpful to repeat the question. So yeah, the question again is what kind of training is provided in Eikaiwa schools?
Yeah, I would say formally, I didn't have a great deal. But what I was in like a kind of mini community of practice where I had like more experienced teachers kind of gradually kind of socializing me into the group and gave me hints, but they were contextually dependent, right? So they were really useful, kind of like what Luke was saying. So they weren't trying to apply CELTA to it. They knew what worked. And obviously I had to use my agency as well to put my individual take on it. But yeah, that was so valuable. And it's continued. It's just my community of practice is now university teachers, but it's the same process basically.
Yeah, just to add, that was definitely a part of it for me as well, because of the kind of the shared teachers room. There was like sharing of ideas on pretty much like every break, every 10-minute break between lessons, there was always a shout out. Anyone got an idea for a role play using present continuous? Quick. And there was this kind of constant sharing of ideas, at least in the branches that I was working at. Yeah.
Did you, Patrick, have anything to add on that?
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say, obviously it varies a lot from situation to situation. And the very first, the school that I was at for 9 years, when I started there, I took over, I was mainly teaching children's classes to start with, and I took over from an Australian teacher, and the class was complete chaos. But I also happened to be to see, as part of my kind of introduction to the school, a class that was taught by another Australian teacher, which was just fantastic. It was like everything was kind of organized, and really through seeing his class and asking him about his class, it was possible to kind of change the kind of chaotic class. But the fact that the one class had kind of got into chaos and another class wasn't, kind of emphasized to me how important it is to have training and communication about the way classes are taught, I guess.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, that question again was once about what kind of training is provided in Eikaiwa schools. After that, Ross Sampson here had another question, and that was, how can Eikaiwa teachers be encouraged to research within their schools, and should they be? Okay, Dan, I see your hands up there.
Okay, in terms of should, I would say, as long as it's not to the detriment of their life, like, you don't want anyone burning out. But as a teacher, I found it really, really, like, if you do something like Lesley, like action research, it can really, really inform your teaching and keep you stimulated, right? So for me personally, I never really felt research was a chore, but I'm kind of a nerd. But yeah, for me, like, it just kept me like, oh, I've got something new to try out. But what would help teachers is, yeah, having more venues for publication, having more support. Also, for example, taking away some of the mystique of the R word research, like getting rid of some of the smoke and mirrors and showing, yeah, these are people, and it's not that hard depending on where you go. So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right.
Yeah, so is that
Yeah,
okay?
go ahead,
So,
please.
yeah, so related to that, I think that
how can Eikaiwa teachers be encouraged to research?
I think it would be great if Eikaiwa teachers could know about qualitative research and things like action research, because if you're a teacher and you think that research is about quantitative research and you only have a very small number of students, then it just feels like you're in a situation where it's impossible to do any kind of research. But if you're kind of aware of things like case studies and being able to do classroom action research, I think that would be really helpful to the teachers concerned anyway, in terms of it, making it possible for them and encouraging them.
Just to add, I think people are discussing it in the chat box because a lot of Eikaiwa is based around children's teaching. I think getting ethically and getting permission from parents is a big barrier. I don't have a solution how that can be overcome. I mean, they are children. You do need to be ethically careful when researching on these. So I guess that's a big factor with all kinds of research into children's teaching, I guess, as part of it.
All right, thank you very much. Well, that puts us pretty close to the time for this section. So thank you very much, Dan, Patrick, and Luke. Really appreciate your thoughts and contributions there. Let's go ahead and we're going to transition to our next section where all four presenters are here, I think. And so, yeah, if we've got, Andy Boon, Ruth Iida, Lesley Ito, and Ewen MacDonald. Are you guys ready? Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead, and because there's four people, there are three in the last one, we had a bit of a transition time, but let's go ahead and jump right in just to make sure we've got as much time as possible going on here. And so first, like before, if I could have a 3-minute intro introduction to yourself and your chapter from each of you. First, Andy Boon, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to share a PowerPoint just to be radical, but it won't be a long PowerPoint. So my chapter was about moving on, life after Eikaiwa. And I've been in Japan for 23 years, and I worked for an Eikaiwa for 4 years. And I did the traditional route of Eikaiwa, part-time university, contract university to tenure. So that's kind of a usual route for the Eikaiwa teacher. There's a lot of us out there. The motivation for my chapter came from an earlier paper that I'd done, which was edited by Chris Stilwell. And he wanted to look at people who had had existing professions before they went into language teaching, and what skills did they draw on from that profession. So at that time, I was a bartender. This is me. Look how young I look. Oh my God. I was a bartender for 7 years. So I wrote a chapter about the skills that I drew on from bartending into my English classes. So when Dan did the call for papers for this, I was very excited because I always wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to look at transferable skills, the skills that you learn by being an Eikaiwa teacher. And I was particularly interested in those who went on to different professions. So is Eikaiwa a worthwhile springboard to other jobs? And if you read my chapter, you'll find the conclusions that I came out with the 10 interviews. The transferable skills were time management. You have to prep your class, you have to deal with time all of the time. So this was a transferable skill. Communication skills, dealing with people from all ages and how to communicate, how to modify your language. Mentoring skills, you're teaching the students, but also you may be involved in teacher training. The ability to think on one's feet, to reflect in action and deal with a critical incident is applicable to all jobs. Self-efficacy, the belief in yourself that you can actually do that, to stand up in front of a group of people and teach, it takes a lot of courage. And when you're a new entry level teacher, you begin to believe, hang on, I can do this. And that self-efficacy transfers into your next job. Selling skills. Eikaiwa is a business. You need to be able to sell your classes so that the students continue. But this is a very useful skill in business. And then finally, language skills. A lot of Eikaiwa teachers developed Japanese skills, which they then used in other professions once they left Eikaiwa. And that is my 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Andy. Next, Ruth, please. Can't hear you. I think you're still muted.
Okay. That was interesting, Andy, because I would argue that that list of skills is what I had before I came to Eikaiwa just through being a mother. And I would argue that being a parent requires all those same skills, even the language skills. So when I came to Japan in 1999, I didn't intend to do Eikaiwa. I didn't know what I intended to do. I just came as the wife of an academic. And probably 5 days after I landed in Japan, a group of women came to my house and said, we're your neighbors and we want you to teach our children. I was like, okay, I don't have anything else to do. So that's how I came into Eikaiwa. And I also want to say that those 5 women came to my house because my husband was a big famous guy in the community. He had the highest grade point average of any student in the local junior high school. And years down the road, everyone remembered that. And my parents-in-law also had a super good relationship with everyone in the neighborhood. So I had a good start and I had all the skills. And my chapter is about what I didn't have, which was knowledge of the brain and how learners learn. Only I didn't know I didn't have that. So I thought I had a very super successful school. And I did. I taught for 15 years. and had a great business and a very loyal group of students and loyal parents who became my staff. It wasn't till the quake in 2011, which took me to Tokyo as an anti-nuclear protester. That's where I met people from ETJ, the Dave and Paul people, people from ITDI, International Teachers Development Institute. And being very social, they all said, why don't you develop yourself further? And I was like, okay, I'm bored with what I'm doing. And I was. It was going so smoothly. I really can't say I was unhappy or anything. But through those people, I became curious and I decided to go back and get my master's degree. Go back. It had been over 20 years since I'd been in an academic environment. But I chose to go to Temple University in Tokyo. And I chose to do live classes, not online. And I closed my school, which was pretty radical. And people I asked said, don't do it. You'll never get your students back. 3 minutes?
Well, 5 more seconds, but.
But I did. I came back and I went right back to my position in the school. So my chapter is the story of how I did that.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry if that was that's
No,
intended.
that's fine.
So, all right,
Impossible in 3 minutes.
yeah. Lesley, if you could have yours for your introduction.
Okay, good. Let me just set my timer, make sure I don't go over. Okay, great. So hello. So yes, my name is Lesley Ito. So I have been teaching in or as the owner of an Eikaiwa for about 27 years. I now own Big Bow English Lab in Nagoya, which is a school only for young learners, which is, I always say it's intensive, extensive, and a bit more expensive. We have like 90-minute classes. I teach all of the classes myself with an assistant teacher. We have a CLIL curriculum and also a very, very strong focus on literacy, including an extensive reading library. When I started this school, I didn't set out to attract returnees, but now over about half of our students fit in sort of a loose returnees category, meaning a lot of international preschool graduates are in there too. I also used to have more like a plain vanilla Eikaiwa, which had 2 other full-time teachers besides myself. That school actually kind of closed about 2010. So I had one school was kind of going down while I was building up another school, which was so much fun. It was really difficult. I've also taught part-time in a university. I taught part-time in a university from 2015 until 2017. And during that time, I was getting a master's degree. I finally decided, with the encouragement of Andy Boon, my friend, who encouraged me to go get my master's degree, my Master's of Science from Aston University. I did the distance program. I was the last teaching young learners candidate for that program. So I was finishing up my master's, and then at that time I decided my school was getting busy. I decided to stop teaching at the university, and that confused a lot of people. What do you mean? You're leaving university for full-time Eikaiwa? What are you doing? Isn't it the opposite? So that was kind of funny. My chapter, which I wrote, which was a very cathartic experience to write, let me tell you, I had a lot of stories to tell, was on the struggle many school owners feel when parents pressure them to do developmentally inappropriate things when teaching their children, such as making them take the ACAN at a very young age, start writing before children's hands have developed, teaching them grammar rules using meta language, which is inappropriate for young learners, or giving returnee children a textbook intended for adults, just to give a few examples. As you know, kind of it's an Asian thing. Many parents feel earlier is better and a sign of their child's high intelligence, and society really, really rewards that. Schools worry about losing business to other schools in the short term. I know in my experience, I have lost business for sticking to what I know is right. And I have also been criticized by other school owners who believe that the customer is always right, actually to the point where I was publicly harassed online for my beliefs. But however, I do have seen recently that there's a lot of school owners who do believe more in developmentally appropriate practices, which is very encouraging to me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lesley. And last panelist on this section is Ewen MacDonald. Your 3 minutes, please.
Okay, so hi, my name is Ewen MacDonald, and I worked in Eikaiwa for about 18 months while I was doing an MA TESOL degree. And my chapter was titled Eikaiwa versus Juku, the affordances and constraints of each context. And I believe my experience was quite unique as I simultaneously taught Juku English classes and Eikaiwa classes to adults at the Juku itself while doing my MA TESOL. And in my chapter, I wrote about how my learning from my MA program helped me take greater advantage of the affordances I was offered. But it also caused tensions for me due to institutional constraints, which over time influenced my evolving identity as a professional teacher. So for my Eikaiwa lessons, I was given a lot of freedom and control for lesson content, but my school's management put basically zero thought into scheduling and establishing a curriculum. My school's focus seemed to be on the profitability of the Juku, and Eikaiwa was a means to make money to support the Juku. And the onus was placed on me to plan everything for Eikaiwa, which made lesson planning and continuity in instruction very challenging. At the same time, however, I did my best for my students. I tried giving them greater input over lesson content, and I incorporated things that I learned from my master's program into my instruction, such as task-based language teaching, pragmatic instruction, and so on. So as mentioned, Eikaiwa was almost a means of making money to support the Juku, and in contrast to the management's minimal concern for Eikaiwa, the management invested heavily in their Juku English program. But at the same time, institutional constraints such as the curriculum and their expectations of what I should do as a teacher limited my autonomy in teaching according to my beliefs. And I often found myself questioning the value of the school's educational policies. So I tried to negotiate these constraints in Juku by identifying spaces within them and shaping lessons in a way that I believed would provide students with greater learning opportunities while still trying to meet the lesson expectations of the school. And I think the main takeaway from my experience that I believe is an implication for the Eikaiwa industry as a whole is that conflicts of interest between business concerns and educational concerns is a very common occurrence in Eikaiwa, and it can lead to tension between teachers and management. It can lead to issues, but for any teachers in this kind of situation, I hope they can feel empowered to analyze their own teaching practices and reflect on and take advantage of any opportunities for affordances within the constraints that they identify. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll go into, just as the same format as in the first section, go into the questions, the set questions. And the first question again is, what are factors or barriers that result in a lack of research on Eikaiwa? And Ruthie, since you were wanting to, you were so excited to join in the first session, can we get your response on that?
In my experience, and I was just talking to someone yesterday, a lot of people aren't interested in researching Eikaiwa because there's no numbers, and they want to do quantitative research with like 100 people, and classes are small. And like people said before, you have the privacy issue, and that's super, super serious when you're talking about 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. Plus, you're not going to find so many cooperative 4- and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds that cooperate in the way you want them to. So there's a multiplicity of issues.
Thank you, Ruthie. Any thoughts, Lesley, or?
So wait, so the question was barriers to research, right?
Correct. What are factors or barriers that result in a lack of research on Eikaiwa?
Okay, fasten your seatbelts. I have a lot to say on this subject. Okay, first of all, a lot what Ruthie said. I mean, for example, at my program at Aston is very much research based. I was required to do a research project for every single module I did. My husband said, I will support you. He owns a school with me. And then I said, well, we have to give permission slips. And oh boy, we really went back and forth with that. He was very, very hesitant to do that. And this was my husband who agreed to support me during this project. So I thought, oh, this is a lot of the reason why this doesn't happen, is because getting permission, because like Dan said, a lot of Eikaiwa these days are, most of the students are children. I have also been told that by other university professors. When I was complaining in the faculty room, at my university, why isn't there more research on children? And I was told, oh, it's because our university will not allow that for privacy reasons, that there's a lot of hoops that they have to jump through. So then they end up quitting and just giving up and deciding to do their own students because it's easier. That's one of the factors. Another one of the factors is that like Ruthie said, doing research on children is really hard sometimes. I mean, I would get surveys back from kids and I couldn't read them, so I had to toss them out. Or I was howling, actually. How many of you read Olivia Kennedy did a interview with Rod Ellis recently in the TLT, and he talked about doing research on children, about how he says he was just expressing, he's like, it is impossible trying to do research on kids because they don't follow the directions. They just do not follow the directions. That's another factor. I have been very outspoken on social media for the past couple of years about the need for more research on children. I know Carolyn Lindsay, who was a plenary speaker a couple of years ago, was talking about how in the world, about 70% of the students are children. However, only about 30% of the research out there is done on children. And so I became more outspoken about this. And I know that recently there have been more people who are interested in doing research on Eikaiwa and on children. However, I've seen some cringy things happening with researchers who want to do that with their approach. I'm just gonna be very honest about this. There are a lot of university professors out there who believe that people who teach children or people who are longtime Eikaiwa teachers are teachers to be like pitied a little bit, and they have a bit of a condescending attitude toward what we're doing. I was just talking to Dan and Ryan about somebody who approached me and said, she's like, oh, Lesley, I really hope that you're using phonics in class. I'm like, I've been doing that for 25 years. I presented about that 15 years ago. Why are you talking to me like phonics, like it was just discovered yesterday? Why instead of like coming in with that kind of idea, why aren't you coming in and seeing what we're doing before you come in with your preconceived ideas? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness gracious, I hope if people do this, then you're not going to make any headway, because the word's going to get around. So if people want to do research on Eikaiwa and they actually find somebody like Ruthie, who was very wonderful in letting a researcher come in and do an ethnographic study on your school, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was amazing that you let him do that. But he came in with the right attitude. Mm-hmm. He came in with the right attitude. I just really hope that a lot of people are going to come into the right attitude and see what schools are doing. Because I'll tell you one thing, I got my MA when I was after I've been teaching for about 23 years. And I was hoping to learn a lot. I'll tell you, I might have deepened my understanding about what I did. I may have been able to put a lot of labels, like, oh, that's what I've been doing, and here's the word for it. Did I fundamentally change the way that I was doing things? No. It gave me more confidence in what I had been doing. And there are a lot of really innovative things going on in Eikaiwa because we have that freedom. And I really hope if people want to study Eikaiwa, that they will come in and let me see what the Eikaiwa school can teach me, rather than I have a bunch of ideas about what the Eikaiwa school should be doing or what is doing wrong or what have you.
Thank you, Lesley. Looking at the time here, you and Andy, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Oh, Andy, okay.
I just want to say, when I first went into Eikaiwa, my intention was to see Japan, do the best I can for my students, and then go on with the rest of my life. I didn't think that I would be here right now, 23 years later, working at a Japanese university. And if you'd said to me, right, you got to research your classes when I first got there, I would have been like, well, you know, I'm trying to do the best I can, but I can't add research onto my schedule as well. So I think for a lot of Eikaiwa teachers, the young ones, especially with my chapter, they're doing an entry-level job, and then they're going to move on to something else. Now, they may do the best they can for that job, and they may reflect in action, which is a kind of research, but they're not going to do like academic research because they're not going to stay in teaching. They're here for a 1 or 2 year experience. So the research, yes, is important, but not everyone's going to do it.
That's a very good point, Andy. That's a really, really good point.
Yeah, I mean, they're here to do, you know, isn't it a great way to do your first job? Live in Japan, experience the culture. Japanese students are wonderful from all ages, and you have this wonderful glowing experience. We're treated so well by the students, and then they take that experience into whatever profession they go on to, you know. My good friend is now running some mental health association in Canada. I mean, you know, and I remember drinking with him in Eikaiwa, you know. It's great to see how people progress, and it's not always going to be about the research for everyone.
Thank you very much. Ewan, did you have any thoughts to add to that, or?
Well, I think, like, as Andy meant, well, basically, I think maybe the majority of research is likely to be done by people who are like doing a higher education degree, like a master's degree, or people who have already finished their master's degree. And I mean, I didn't do any research as a teacher until I started my master's program. And that was the reason why I did my own research in Juku and Eikaiwa. And I was fortunate enough to get permission from the management and also parents. Being in a like small school was allowed me to actually do my own research. And I think another reason why there may be a lack of research, someone mentioned in the chat a little bit earlier, but in the case of chain Eikaiwa, maybe they are reluctant to allow research in order to avoid any possible criticism of their teaching methodologies and even working conditions. I think I recall a couple of papers in recent times, maybe they were by James Taylor and they were related to chain Eikaiwa, but mainly he was interviewing people who used to be Eikaiwa teachers or who still were Eikaiwa teachers, but it wasn't something he needed to get permission from the schools of, so he was able to do that. But as for teachers working within a chain Eikaiwa, maybe it's a bit tough to get permission to do research and then publicize it.
Okay.
Just to add to that, there was actually somebody, I forget his name, he's one of the TEFology guys, and he wrote an article a couple of years ago for the TLT, basically saying what you're saying.
Andy, no, Robert Lowe, no?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very important question to be going over, and that was some very good insight. Thank you. Because of the time well spent on that question, we're going to need to shorten the other questions here. I want to get to one, hopefully two of the others. I've marked two off. By the way, that question we just finished on was the what are factors or barriers that result in a lack of research in Eikaiwa. Next one I'd like to look at is, what are your hopes for the future of the Eikaiwa industry? And if we could just get some short comments on that. What are your hopes for the future of the Eikaiwa industry? Who would like to speak on that first? Okay, Ruthie, please.
I'd love to, because what I did was go to a very expensive university. I did it in a short time, but it was like, I told my husband, we're putting the third child through university, and that third child was me. I would like to see organizations like ITDI or ETJ Japan more valued in the Eikaiwa industry and in other places as well. You know, if a teacher shows up there and says, here's where I got my training, here's what it means, I would like to see them get a better paycheck, more respect, possibly, you know, given responsibilities like training and mentoring. That's one thing I'd like to see happen.
Thank you.
I did what a whole lot of people can't do just financially and used my own savings to do it.
Yeah, it is very expensive.
Yeah, it was
Um,
worth it.
Okay, Andy, Ewen, Lesley, any thoughts on that one? Okay, Ewen.
Yeah, I'd like to see more, well, firstly, maybe two things. Firstly, I'd like to see more positive information published about the Eikaiwa industry, because like those Japan Times articles from a while back were pretty negative, and it talked about McEnglish. So for the general public who read that kind of thing, it sounds like all Eikaiwa is terrible, but more stuff like from this book, like how Eikaiwa teachers are working hard to provide quality language education for students. And also, so maybe the stigma of being an Eikaiwa teacher is reduced. And the second thing I would like to see is, someone mentioned this in the previous session, but management of Eikaiwa and teachers working together more, where teachers can have a voice and they can use their voice to communicate any concerns that they have with management or any opportunities they see to make improvements to classes that benefit student learning. Yeah, because in my own situation, there was a lot of conflict between teachers and management, because essentially the management wanted to make all the decisions themselves and they didn't really want to hear our own concerns, and it made myself and my teaching colleagues feel like we were unimportant. So yeah, management and teachers working together more to make improvements.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? Let's see, Andy, or shall we move on?
Oh, just really quickly. Yeah, so definitely, like to have like, this book was really great, but like I pointed out to Dan, there were only what Ruthie and I were the only people who are still in Eikaiwa, who've been in Eikaiwa for a really, really long time. We were the only voices in the book. I would like to have, more voices out there. The only problem is, like, somebody was asking me about, why don't, more Eikaiwa teachers, publish and things like that. If you're in university, you have to publish. You have to publish to survive. For me, if I publish, it's because it's a nice thing to do. I get nothing for it. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I put it on my resume to impress myself. No, I mean, I would really like to see more Eikaiwa teachers be able to have, but they just don't, they don't know how to do the academic writing. They've never had that kind of experience. They don't have that kind of support. So until that type of thing happens, or other people come in and research and use their voices and put it in their own article, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Andy, you had your hand up for just a second, right?
I was just saying, please go to Ruthie or Leslie. So. They're to the right of me on Zoom right now, so I was like, go over there.
Well, if we can go, yeah. So thank you. We were talking there. Yeah. What are the hopes for the future of the Eikaiwa industry? Because of time, I want to do kind of like what I did in the first session with this last question. The question is, what value do you feel Eikaiwa schools have that other contexts do not? And if I could get each of you to just give me, in essentially one sentence, about what value do you feel Eikaiwa schools have that other contexts do not? Okay, go ahead, Lesley.
I would say there's a lot of interest these days, with a lot of people getting very excited about, what's going on in the public elementary schools. And everybody's so excited about that. No, sorry. Eikaiwa schools is where the real action is. We are the one actually teaching the kids how to read. We're the ones like doing like CLIL lessons and flipped classroom. And I even know somebody who has a SOLE, the SOLE, the Sugita Mitra. I mean, there's a lot of really innovation, and we're making so much progress. And it's just hilarious to me how the public elementary schools are getting much more attention when they're not making the progress. They're not having the success that we are. We're basically being ignored, for all the wonderful things we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, Ruthie.
I'll pick up where Lesley left off, because I'm right there. when public elementary schools are still starting to teach phonics after they teach Romaji. We're teaching phonics from 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're reading. They're reading at 5, not fluently yet, but they've got all the basics. And once this child learns to read, they start educating themselves, and the teacher takes on a new role. And to me, that's huge. You're not going to end up with students that depend on you all their lives, because they'll move on and they'll begin educating themselves.
Thank
So
you.
that's my topping off what Lesley had to say.
Andy.
I don't have anything to add really to the
Okay.
points that have already been said, so
Okay.
I will remain silent on them.
Ewan, do you have one sentence on that?
Okay, I had a couple of things. This is not always true, but in Eikaiwa, like often lessons are taught to like one-on-one or to small groups of students, so it can be easier to tailor your lessons to the students, and they can be provided with more input on the lesson content and their own like learning outcomes. This would be in contrast to, say, a lot of university courses where the content of the classes may be quite rigid, although in Eikaiwa it may also be the case too. And just a second thing was that I think teachers can build a community with their colleagues in Chain Eikaiwa, and they can get ideas for lessons, they can reflect on their own teaching practices. This would be in contrast to maybe part-time university teachers who often do not have any contact with other teachers at all in their job. They just go to the school and teach and go home. So those were my 2 ideas.
All right. Thank you very much. I haven't seen, there are a lot of very interesting comments coming through on the comments on the chat feed. I haven't seen any specific questions come through outside of the 2 that we had in the first session. Apologize if I'm missing anything on there. The first question had to do with what kind of training, and Ruthie's already talked about her training and her situation. And Lesley, you talked about you're doing your school, and then both of you started, I believe, with your own, just with your own schools, right? Or did you start at a Chain Eikaiwa, this Lesley?
No, I jumped. I was teaching at the Eikaiwa that I was at. Okay. And then I ended up changing everything and taking it over.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you didn't, as far as the training, Andy, and if you can talk a little bit about the training, really quickly about the training you received at your Eikaiwa.
I was at a Chain Eikaiwa, and there were several trainings, and they were all about selling, how to sell to the students. But the one best training was actually about teaching. And so I took on the job of being the trainer for that. And I loved getting the Eikaiwa teachers, they'd have to have been with us for a year. And I'd get them into the classroom, and the first thing I would say would be, all of your previous training courses were about selling, but this one is now about teaching. It's about methodology. And that was a pleasure to teach. We used the Diane Larson Freeman book and video, and teachers were encouraged to try out different methodologies and come back the following week and talk about that. And that was a great way of training the teachers, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
There is a question.
Yeah, I just saw that question come through, and we've already talked a good bit about research and what to do with research. So I'm going to go ahead and put the new question in instead. And we've got here, William Morley was asking if you guys have experience of working in the local junior high school elementary system and working, well, you all have, and working with independent Eikaiwa. So Ruthie and Lesley, that'd be the 2 of you, I guess, on the independent Eikaiwa side. Andy, you and I don't think you guys have taught at independent Eikaiwa. Am I correct on that?
I taught an independent Eikaiwa, more or less. Yeah.
Okay, more independent on that one. Well, let's go really quick. I want to hear what training you got in the independent one, and then let's go to this question because I missed you on that.
Oh, in my case, no training. I mean, I did like some mock lessons where I was watched by parents and like the management and stuff, but I mean, I wasn't given any training. I was told how I was told certain things that the management wanted me to do in the way I conducted my lesson, but no training. Acai wasn't my first teaching job, so I worked several years as an ALT and also even at a university before that too. And I think my CELTA would have been useless for Eikaiwa, but I was doing my MA TESOL at the time, and that was really useful because I could take what I learned from my MA classes and put it into practice pretty much immediately.
If you've done the ALT, and Ruth had said she can speak up on this on the next question too, but if you've been the ALT and at that Eikaiwa, it sounds like you could respond. Yeah, so the experience, comparing the teaching experiences between working in the local junior high school or junior high elementary school system and working in independent Eikaiwa. So Ruth, if you could speak up on that first, please.
All right. First of all, I have to say that when I was a teacher in the elementary school system, I was the first teacher in the elementary school system in my city. So I started the program, and the head of the program didn't speak English. He hadn't passed his Sankyu of the Eiken, which means he failed the interview. So he communicated to me first, everything in Japanese. And there was no training, no expectations. He said, you can do what you like. And he presented that as a really positive thing. And at that time, my city had the highest population ever. Every class had 40 kids. And I walked in and I was terrified. So I taught English and Japanese just to keep control. And the minute Japanese teachers saw I could do it, they were in the back of the room sleeping. Literally, one would sleep. So I taught very limited amount of English. I taught everything in Japanese. They had their names around their neck in large letters, so I could say, so-and-so, you're out of line. And I did. I was a mother to those 40 kids, but it was extremely stressful and a mix of levels. And I did it for 5 years until I burned out. So comparing that to what I had in Eikaiwa, very intimate. I knew all my students. I was able to make a plan. I knew my expectations. I could stick to it. Yeah, my heart just relaxed 100%.
Ewen, could you talk about your experience?
I actually didn't work in an elementary school. I worked in a junior high school. It's one thing Ruth mentioned, maybe in Eikaiwa, I was able to know my students really well because I had a small number of them and I saw them every week. In the junior high school, I would often I might only see one particular class once every 2 weeks. So it was more difficult to get to know my students and, what their interests were and things like that. So I think even by the time I left my ALT position, there were still students I didn't really know the names of. So yeah, I think Eikaiwa allowed me to get to know my students really well compared to working as an ALT.
If I know as facilitator, if everyone will indulge me with just a quick comment on this as well, only because I have several ALT contracts with local BOE boards of education in Yamagata. And one of the things we're seeing in the last 2 years is with the textbooks coming out from MEXT and then the electronic whiteboards and touch screens, that at least the teachers that are going, my teachers that are going to the schools say that they've noticed is they're not being asked to be put in charge as much anymore like Ruthie was, but they're becoming tape recorders as the teachers stand at the TV and press the buttons on the TV that they have been given from the software from MEXT.
That's sad.
So that's a change within like the last 2 years. That I'm just putting that in because I don't think others have that experience that recent. So, well, thank you very, very much for everyone. We've got about 5 minutes here left. And I was asked as facilitator to kind of do a couple sum up comments here. But the first thing I want to say is just thank you to all of our participants in the panel. I think it was very, very enlightening, and really wish we had far more than 90 minutes to discuss the different topics and the aspects of them. But I think one theme that is really coming out again and again is how really varied Eikaiwa is. Eikaiwa has so much variation and so many different aspects, and has been since kind of stigmatized as just the McEnglish, and just going in and just the casual English, and then people don't really care. And if you look on, say, Gaijin pop forums and so forth, you see just all these negative comments about everything going on. I know when we post jobs to our school, I post them on as career-oriented teacher wanted at Growing Language School, and we'll sometimes get snide kind of, career-oriented. Yeah, you're talking Eikaiwa. What do you can't be career-oriented, and we're just saying that's not true, that there's a lot of things going on in Eikaiwa, but it does get looked down upon. As Lesley had mentioned when she was talking about her experience, teaching at university and saying, hey, I'm gonna leave to do Eikaiwa, and how everyone's shocked. I have several of my teachers who have left my English school to go on and teach university. We try to support them in doing that. We create a lot of training opportunities and encourage them to be able to go to university if they want to. But I'm similar as well. I taught university for 9 years, and I loved teaching university. It was a lot of fun. I just got too busy with the school. But I chose Eikaiwa, saying, hey, I just don't have time for university. I'm going to do Eikaiwa. And the reason is, for me, I'm teaching a wide variety of students. I think Dan mentioned this. I've got student, I flew on an airplane from Sendai to Narita one time, and got a text message later from the pilot who recognized me saying, Ryan, it's me. And that was a pilot who had come to our school because he wanted to get his English up to snuff to join pilot school, and hadn't had any communication with him. And there here he is, the pilot on my airplane that I'm flying on, saying thank you. And we've now got him in our school ads, by the way. But and things like that. And when I taught at Yamadai, it was great experiences, but I was never watched. There was no pressure for me to have quality lessons. When teachers met together, there was not a sharing of best policies, and that happens that happens at a lot of really good schools. But there are definitely challenges, and balancing education and profit is a significant challenge. And it's a challenge for universities as well, but it's definitely a challenge for Eikaiwa. And we're very excited to see how things change over the coming 10, 20, 30 or more years. So anyway, that puts us right at time. Ryan Air from Andy. I need to relax a little bit more, huh?
It's a pun.
No, it's a company, an airline in the UK.
Thank you thank you for explaining. Thank you.
See, Andy, this is what happens when you try to tell Americans British jokes. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Ryan, sorry. Could I just share the slide again, just for anyone who didn't get the QR code?
Real quick before they kick us off. Yes.
Okay,
please.
thanks.
I won't kick you off quite yet.
Okay, so this is, again, gives you 50% off all ebooks in the Life and Education in Japan series. Some really awesome books in this series, of course ours, but also Diane Holly Nagatomo and Melody Cook and Louise George Kitaka, and many others have written some really awesome books. So please check them out. And yeah, have a good look. Okay, thank you very much.
Can we do a round of applause for everybody?
Yay.
Hey, and definitely read the book. Very good. So very good chapters in there.
All right, thank you, everybody. This room is going to be used for another presentation coming up soon. So just maybe as a final little thing, my first experience in Japan and my first experience teaching at all was at Eikaiwa. And I really identify with what you guys were saying. Luke, I suspect you and I worked for the same organization based on a couple of the comments that you made. It was, I got a big Natsukashi punch in the face when you said a couple of those things. So everybody, as you're enjoying your day of JALT, don't forget on the Eventzilla page up on the top, there's a button for our sponsors, and make sure to check that out. There's a lot of interesting things in there. It's our sponsors that help us, that'll basically allow us to have this conference and to have JALT. So take a look at it and enjoy the rest of your day at the conference.